Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students, scholars, teachers, trainers, professors, professionals, official listeners. I welcome all respected doctors and directors, honorable Mr. Managers, honorable advocates and administrative advisors. I welcome the most honorable present Mr. During next time, I express my section that we are defining our holy Indian spiritual, cultural, social, educational, constitutional identities in the form of unity and diversity. Pashchimi Bengal, मगरहाट पश्चिमी और डायमंड हार्बर सीट के 15 बूथों पर मतदान। भारत विकास का साथी, मुश्किल समय का केवल भार। इतिहास से शुरू, वर्तमान पर नजर और भविष्य की नींव। डायमंड हार्बर में शाम 5 बजे भारत और श्रीलंका के रिश्तों को मिलेगा नया मुकाम। पश्चिम बंगाल चुनाव, भारत श्रीलंका के बीच साझा इतिहास और सांस्कृतिक जुड़ाव। मगरहाट पश्चिमी, रोमांटिक संस्मरणों का श्रीलंका में जीवंत दर्शन। मगरहाट पश्चिम, डायमंड हार्बर 5 बजे 60% मतदान। चुनाव 15 बूथों पर पुनः मतदान। पश्चिम बंगाल, गंगा रामायण मंदिर में दर्शन। राष्ट्रपति का भारतीय समुदायों के साथ सांस्कृतिक संवाद। मगरहाट पश्चिम में शाम 5 बजे 86.11 मतदान। श्रीलंका को $450 मिलियन की मदद। आईएसी की सुविधा 6 जनरेशन तक बढ़ाने की घोषणा। पश्चिम बंगाल चुनाव 15 बूथों पर पुनर्मतदान। श्रीलंका भारत अहम पड़ोसी। राष्ट्रपति श्री राधाकृष्णन की ऐतिहासिक श्रीलंका यात्रा। मगरहाट पश्चिम में शाम 5 बजे भारत और श्रीलंका एक ही सभ्यता की 2 शाखाएं। डायमंड हार्बर में 5 बजे भारत और श्रीलंका 2 देश साझा विरासत। पश्चिम बंगाल चुनाव 15 बूथों पर पुनर्मतदान। राष्ट्रपति की यात्रा से संबंधों का शुरू हुआ नया अध्याय। साझा इतिहास, सांस्कृतिक जुड़ाव और भविष्य की साझेदारी। मुलाकात, संवाद से मिलकर चलने बढ़ने पर सहमति। भारत और श्रीलंका आस्था से लेकर इतिहास के रंग से धर्म, अध्यात्म, संस्कृति और भाषा दोनों देशों को जोड़ने की कड़ी। Trump administration says war in Iran terminated. No exchange of fire since April 7, news official says from Washington. The Trump administration is arguing that the war in Iran has already ended because of the ceasefire that began in early April, an interpretation that would allow the White House to avoid the need to seek congressional approval. The statement furthers an argument laid out by Defense Secretary Patty Hegseth during testimony in the Senate earlier Thursday, when he said the ceasefire effectively paused the war. Under that rationale, the administration has not yet met the requirement mandated by 1973 law to seek common approval from Congress for military action that extends beyond 60 days. The senior administration officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to to discuss the administration's position, set forth purposes of that law, the hostilities that began on Saturday, February 28 have terminated. The officials said the US military and Iran have not exchanged fire since the 2-week ceasefire that begins April 7, while the ceasefire has since been extended. Iran maintained its chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, and the US Navy is maintaining a blockade to prevent Iran oil tankers from getting out to sea. Under the Overpowers Resolution, the law that sought to constrain the president's military powers, President Donald Trump had until Friday to seek conditional authorization of siege fighting. Iran offers new peace talks proposal. Iran delivered a new proposal for peace talks with the US via mediator Pakistan. State media reported Friday which negotiations between the two sides frozen despite a weeks-long ceasefire. The text of the proposal was handed to Islamabad on Thursday evening, uh, in a new agency reported. Above normal heat wave days likely in May, IMD says from New Delhi. Above normal heat wave days are likely in some parties of the foothills of the Himalayas, east coast states, Gujarat and Maharashtra in May, the IMD said in its monthly forecast on Friday. The department also highlighted that the rainfall average over the country as a whole during May is most likely to be above normal. With onset of southwest monsoon over Andaman and Nicobar Islands around May 14 to 16, Director General of Meteorology IMD Mrityunjay Mahapatra said during May 2026 minimum temperatures are expected to be above normal. Prohibitory orders clamped along KOL board pumping centers from Kolkata. The day after West Bengal CM Mamata Banerjee spent hours at EVM strong room of her Bhavanipur constituency alleging possibility of ballot practices. CEO Manoj Agarwal on Friday said that there is no scope for wrongdoing at counting centers following tensions around two counting centers in Kolkata. Late on Thursday, police clamped prohibitory orders on gatherings outside all seven strong rooms in the city, stating that round-the-clock CCTV monitoring of strong rooms was in place. Otherwise, dismissed the allegation as baseless. Recalling in 15 votes in Bengal today, she says. The Election Commission on Friday ordered recalling on May 2 in 15 polling stations in West Bengal, where voting was held in April 29 in the second phase of the assembly elections in Andhra, the city of Bengal. The EC said that recalling has been ordered based on inputs received from the state. All machinery and voting will be held from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. First FIR under Punjab Stafford and the secretary's law from Bathinda. The first FIR under Punjab's amended Anti-Secretaries Act was filed at Lord City Police Station in Eastern District on Friday after the recovery of torn pages from the Kasargod Sukmani Sahib. Man gets exemption from court bidding, occupied with a special session of assembly on Friday. Sri Bhagwant Man could not keep his date with a trial court in Bansha in a criminal defamation case. AAP wins confidence motion in House, CM calls for recall provision from schedule. The AAP government in Punjab successfully passed the confidence motion in the state. Assembly on Friday and exercise. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann described as a necessary rebuttal to rumors suggesting the party was on the verge of a split. MP vote tragedy toll rises to 9, 6 still missing from Jabalpur. Rescuers recovered 5 more bodies from Jabalpur district's Bargidam, where a cruise boat capsized, taking the toll to win 9 on Friday. Gangster murder witness gunned down in Punjab. The facing copy lecture. A key witness in 2015 murder of gangster Sukha Pahalwan was shot dead on Thursday night. Boy killed in crocodile attack. GST mop up charge to 2.4 lakh rupees in April. Commercial LPG price hiked by 993 rupees. 115 LMTV procured so far in Punjab from Bukita. 143 action plans used to LGT panel check in Banala district from Bukita. Car falls into drain clouds, shame for youth from Pathankot. Chima attacks BJP over cost election gas price hike from Chandigarh. Punjab reports 341 new cases of farm fires, overtakes Haryana Delhi from Bhatinda. Voting for 750 rupees as minister raised from Chandigarh. BJP passes no confidence motion against Man government from Chandigarh. The Punjab BJP on Friday held a mock session of the Vidhan Sabha People's Assembly and passed a no confidence motion against Bhagwant Man's led up government. Punjab BJP working president and Pathankot MLA Ashwini Sharma made a scathing attack on the AAP-led government for not releasing the pending DA installments and dues of the employees. He said the government cares to votes for the High Court direction and has become anti-employee. The BJP leader also alleged that crucial issues like gangsterism, drug deaths, and law and order collapse are not being debated. He added, the politics is built on untruth and its promise to make Punjab drug-free has completely failed. Punjab BJP President Sunil Jakhar termed the situation in the state as the darkest hour of democracy, he said. The people of Punjab have already judged this government and are eager to remove it. The AAP leadership has turned Punjab into an ATM and is trying to extract as much as possible before leaving power. The senior leader LAC also warned bureaucrats working against rules, saying that all their assets and properties are gone. Referring to financial assistance from the center, Jackal said funds for canal water projects are entirely coming from the Punjab has received crores of rupees under special scheme from the center. Transport workers protest seek release of jailed police from Patiala. The members of the Punjab Roadways, Panbus and PRTC contact workers union held protest at bus depots across the state on International Labour Day to press for their demands. They also announced a series of strikes through May. The protesters are demanding the release of detained police and an end to systematic privatization of the state's public transport network. Union leaders addressed gate rallies simultaneously across all 27 bus depots in the state and outlined a protest calendar that could severely severely disrupt bus services in the state. Union leaders addressed gate rallies simultaneously across all 27 bus depots in the state and outlined a protest calendar that could severely disrupt bus services in the state. Security of RPMLA Aroda restored nearly after years from Jalika. Gunmen kill witness in Sukha Kehlwan murder case from Jalika. Coercive search, High Court seeks reply from PPCB on Trident's plea. From Chandigarh, BJP condemning researches. Jalandhar condemning the PPCB search and Rajya Sabha member Rajendra Gupta's industry on Thursday. Senior BJP leader Manoranjan Kalia said it only include authoritarian and dictatorial mindset of the Punjab government. Gupta is not just an RS member, but is a very well respected industrialist who has invested huge money in Punjab, Kalia said. Punjab and Haryana High Court have issued notices to Punjab government and the State Pollution Control Board after the Barnala headquartered Trident Limited filed an appeal apprehending coercive action from BCB following the April 13 inspection of its units. मुख्य निर्वाचन अधिकारी चुनाव आयोग करेगा फाल्टा में पूर्व मतदान पर अंतिम फैसला पश्चिम बंगाल तत्काल पुलिस ऑब्जर्वर्स भी नियुक्त काउंटिंग सेंटर पर निगरानी बढ़ी मोबाइल आधारित आपदा संचार प्रणाली का शुभारंभ श्रीनगर वंदे भारत ट्रेन का संचालन आज से शुरू हर मौसम में कनेक्टिविटी पर्यटन और कारोबार को मिलेगा बढ़ावा छत्तीसगढ़ आईईडी ब्लास्ट में डीआरजी के 3 जवान शहीद एक घायल कांकेर नारायणपुर बॉर्डर आईएमडी 15% hike in minimum wages Punjab Assembly gift for labor force House passes resolution to raise base rate after 13 years from Chandigarh. On Labour Day, the Punjab Assembly unanimously passed a resolution approving a 15% increase in minimum wages after 13 years, extending the benefit to all registered workers in both government and private sectors. Bhagwan said, the House fully recognizes workers' immense contribution to the state's socio-economic progress. The wages revision exercise should have been undertaken 13 years ago but was ignored due to prolonged insensitivity towards the working class. Sukrana Yatra announcing the Sukrana Yatra Manshed to express gratitude to the Almighty. I'll embark on a Sukrana Yatra from Anandpur Sahib on May 6 and until May 9 will pay obedience at Takht Shri Keshgढ़ Sahib, Shri Akal Takht Sahib, Damdama Sahib, Maswana Sahib, Gurudwara, Duke Nivaran Sahib and Shri Fatehgarh Sahib. With us all motive of thanking and like Almighty for giving the strength and courage to pass this important act. The CM also slammed coverage over its walkout from the special session and announced a Shukrana Yatra following the passage of the Jagat Jot Sri Granth Sahib Sarkar Amendment Act 2026. One said the base rate of minimum wages for the working class was last divided in 2012, and although the DNS allowance has continued to rise since then, the base rate has not been increased. Calling the revision of the minimum wages of workers a tribute to workers, he shared the intent House recognizes their immense role in the socio-economic progress of the state, and so this should have been done 13 years ago. No one paid heed due to due to insensitivity towards the working class. One said to previous regimes passed without raising wages for these hard-working and resilient people. Cabinet approves Directorate of Forensic Science from Chandigarh. The Punjab Cabinet on Friday took a series of decisions focused on strengthening public safety, boosting rural incomes, and improving regulatory frameworks. With approvals for a revamped forensic science system, a new farm stay policy, and official statement shared in a significant decision aimed at ensuring public safety through speedy investigation of crime through efficient evidence processing. The Punjab cabinet, led by Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann, on Friday gave nod for establishment of Directorate of Forensic Science Services in Punjab, it said. A decision to this effect was taken by the Council of Ministers in its meeting held under the chairmanship of Punjab, the Directorate of Forensic Services, Punjab, earlier known as Forensic Science Laboratory, Punjab, will be under the control of the Department of Home Affairs. The nomenclature of Regional Testing Forensic Science Laboratories will now be Regional Forensic Science Laboratories working under DFS, while the Chief Chemical Examiner Laboratory third will be integrated into DFS as a special toxicology division. The forensic capacity will be strengthened through creation of new technical divisions including DNA, ballistics and cyber forensic at regional science laboratories in Amritsar, Bathinda and Ludhiana. 28 mobile forensic units will be established with one mobile forensic van operating in each police district under the supervision of a scientific officer crime scene. In another decision, the cabinet has given concurrence to the Farm Stay Policy 2026 to boost farmer incomes and rural tourism. The policy aims to promote farm-based experiential tourism while creating sustainable and supplementary income opportunities for farmers across Punjab. The policy leverages Punjab's strong agrarian base, rich rural culture, and hospitality tradition, positioning farm stays as an important pillar of inclusive and responsible tourism development. The policy is farmer-centric and enables farmers to utilize a small portion of their agricultural land to offer authentic rural experiences, farm-based accommodation, local cuisine, and cultural activities without disturbing primary agricultural practices. The statement said by providing an enabling and simplified regulatory framework, the policy reduces procedural hurdles, promotes ease of doing business, and encourages rural households, particularly youth, to participate in tourism-linked entrepreneurship alongside farming. The policy emphasizes sustainability through eco-friendly construction, waste management, water conservation, and promotion of organic and natural farming practices. The cabinet also gave consent to the society's registration. Punjab Amendment Bill 2026 by amending the Society Registration Act 1860. Dr. R. Balasubramanian और डॉक्टर रामनिया की हुई नियुक्ति। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को पीएम ने दी मंजूरी। संतोष कुमार मल्ला ने किया भारतीय प्रतिनिधिमंडल का नेतृत्व। डॉक्टर आर बालासुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर रामनिया की हुई नियुक्ति। बैठक में भारत नेपाल के बीच तकनीकी और प्रशासनिक मुद्दों पर हुई चर्चा। 11वीं कोसी गंडकी परियोजना बैठक। कोसी और गंडक परियोजना से अतिक्रमण हटाने पर सहमति। कोसी और गंडक परियोजना से अतिक्रमण हटाने पर सहमति। कोसी परियोजना के तहत पते पर दी गई भूमि के सीमांकन। जीपीएस तकनीक के जरिए भूमि सीमांकन पर बड़ी बात। डॉक्टर बालासुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर रामनिया की नियुक्ति। कोसी क्षेत्र में बाढ़ से बचाव के लिए नियंत्रण। नेपाल प्रभाव में की जा रही कार्यों की नियमित रूप से सूची भेजेगा भारत। बैठक में भारत नेपाल के बीच तकनीकी और प्रशासनिक मुद्दों पर हुई चर्चा। 11वीं कोसी गंडकी परियोजना बैठक। भारत ने जल निकासी और जल भराव के मुद्दों पर परीक्षण की दी सहमति। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति। डॉक्टर आर बालासुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर राम अनिया की हुई। Holder sprinkles stardust on Gujarat Titans campaign. Perfect storm. GT Director of Cricket Vikram Salanki hailed experience all-rounders contribution after win against RCB from Ahmedabad. Jashan Holder had to wait for the chance at Gujarat Titans, but when it arrived, the West Indies all-rounder gave the clearest reminder yet of why the franchisee had invested ₹7 crore in him at the auction. RCB wanted closer to can holder catch. Bhubaneswar says from Ahmedabad. Royal Challengers Bengaluru. RCB Seamer Bhubaneswar. Kumar Shadeg's team wanted the umpires to take a closer look at Jason Holder's catch to dismiss Captain Rajat Patidar, a decision that became one of the major talking points in RCB's 4-wicket defeat to Gujarat Titans on Thursday. Milestone I would love to match with Evans in his 5 IPL trophies, KL Rahul says from New Delhi. Delhi Capitals owner KL Rahul has made it clear that personal milestones count for little without titles, saying his biggest ambition remains matching MS Dhoni's all of 5 IPL trophies, even as he continues to scale the run charts in the league. Inconsistent CSK struggling MI face off in survival battle from Chennai. Their IPL 2026 campaign hanging by a thread. Chennai Super Kings and Mumbai Indians face a must-win showdown here on Saturday. With both sides desperate to reverse their inconsistent form and stay afloat in the playoff race, the two most successful franchises in IPL history have endured a forgettable campaign so far, with neither side able to build sustained momentum. गंगा एक्सप्रेस से उत्तर प्रदेश की अर्थव्यवस्था को नया। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को पीएम ने दी मंजूरी। गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को नया बढ़ावा। 600 किलोमीटर लंबा गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे 36,000 करोड़ का निवेश। मेरठ से प्रयागराज तक गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे से जुड़ेगा यूपी। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्य डॉक्टर आर बालासुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर रामनिया की नियुक्ति। गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे से उत्तर प्रदेश की अर्थव्यवस्था। गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को नया बढ़ावा। 600 किलोमीटर लंबा गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे 36,000 करोड़ का निवेश। मेरठ से प्रयागराज तक गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे से जुड़ेगा यूपी। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्य हैं, डॉक्टर बाला सुब्रमण्यम, डॉक्टर जलाराम अनिया। गंगा एक्सप्रेस वे से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को नया बढ़ावा। Cricket wants to go the football way, but purists wouldn't let it happen from New Delhi. Having stepped away from a thriving having stepped away from a thriving international career to focus on the franchise circuit for former South Africa batter Henrik Kawashan believes it is the time T20 cricket is viewed almost as a separate sport, one in which professional leagues can flourish and help globalize cricket. Wood penalty and forestry over Villa from Nottingham. Nottingham Forest twice would smash the penalty into the top corner to secure a 1-0 victory over Aston Villa in the first leg of their All English Europa League semi-final on Thursday. India blanked Taipei storm into Thompson Cup semi-final. Their patches will make IPL boring, Bundesliga of Mumbai. Inconsistent CSK starting in my face off in survival battle from Chennai. Madrid Open blocks and World's title defense. 27 पुलिस ऑब्जर्वर। नीति आयोग में दो नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को दिया मंजूरी। 600 किलोमीटर लंबा एक्सप्रेस वे 36,000 करोड़ का निवेश। Drug trafficker Tola used fake name Hamza in Turkey. Say officials from Delhi, Mohammed Salim Dola. CGI says tech integration into judicial processes dismantle geographical barriers from Bangkok. Chief Justice of India Suryakant on Friday said integrating technology into judicial processes dismantles geographical barriers to help litigants overcome problems of terrain, finance, and distance. Addressing the inaugural session of the two-day national conclave on technology and judicial education here. The CJ also said the Indian legal landscape has moved away from the era of these people's and where vital records, language in physical storage to a vibrant digital ecosystem. When we speak of integrating technology into judicial processes across the country, we are in effect addressing the dismantling of geographical constraints, whether they arise from difficult terrain, financial barriers, or sheer distance, he said. The journey to upper room was often measured as a test of endurance. The Chief Justice of India said, Punjab will be first state to demand Punjab will be first state to demand stricter anti-defection law, says Man. Man said, when people elect MLAs who in turn elect Rajya Sabha MP, how can those MPs unilaterally decide to merge with another party? Man questioned, he said Punjab would lead the charge in demanding stricter anti-defection laws or a constitutional provision for recall. Punjab will be the first state to demand stricter anti-defection law or recall provision from the president. Commercial LPG price hiked by 993 rupees per 90 kilogram cylinder. No change for household gas consumer. Indian Oil says from New Delhi. The price of 19 kilogram commercial LPG cylinder has been increased by rupees 993 starting Friday, and after the revision, a 19 kilogram cylinder will now cost rupees 3,700 3,071 3,071.5 in Delhi. Commercial LPG rate hike to aggravate job losses. Traffic jams on Mumbai Pune E-way leads to apology from Mahasian. Chaos on missing link project inauguration day from Pune. Traffic chaos was witnessed on both carriageways of the Mumbai-Pune Expressway even as the much-awaited missing link project was inaugurated on Friday afternoon, leading Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis to apologize to stranded commuters, including NCP Lok Sabha MP Supriya Sule. स्थानीय लोगों का टीएमसी पर धमकी देने का आरोप। चेन्नई और मुंबई इंडियंस के बीच मुकाबला आज आईपीएल। स्थानीय लोगों का टीएमसी पर धमकी देने का आरोप। मगरहाट पश्चिम डायमंड हार्बर सीटों के बूथों पर हुआ पुनर्मतदान। टीएमसी को मतगणना प्रक्रिया से जुड़ी याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट से झटका। पीसी करेगा फाल्टा में पुनर्मतदान पर अंतिम फैसला। टीएमसी की याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट का दखल। राज्य सरकार के नॉमिनी भी मतगणना में शामिल होंगे। पीसी करेगा फाल्टा में पुनर्मतदान पर अंतिम फैसला। ममता बनर्जी को किसी पर भरोसा नहीं, वह खो चुकी है जनता विश्वास। लोकसभा अध्यक्ष की महत्वपूर्ण नियुक्तियां। चुनाव आयोग रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर राज्य सरकार का कर्मचारी। चुनाव आयोग नॉमिनी को लेकर आशंका नहीं होनी चाहिए थी। लोकसभा अध्यक्ष की महत्वपूर्ण नियुक्तियां। 77 पुलिस ऑब्जर्वर काउंटिंग सेंटर पर निगरानी बढ़ी। लोकसभा अध्यक्ष की महत्वपूर्ण नियुक्तियां। नीति आयोग में 2 नए पूर्णकालीन सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को पीएम ने दी मंजूरी। डॉक्टर बालासुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर जोराम की नियुक्ति। स्वदेशी सेल ब्रॉडकास्ट सिस्टम का देशव्यापी परीक्षण। स्वदेशी सेल ब्रॉडकास्ट सिस्टम आपदा प्रबंधन श्रीनगर वंदे भारत ट्रेन का संचालन। स्वदेशी सेल ब्रॉडकास्ट सिस्टम का देशव्यापी परीक्षण। हर मौसम में कनेक्टिविटी पर्यटन की जानकारी। छत्तीसगढ़ आईईडी ब्लास्ट में डीआरजी के 3 जवान शहीद, घायल। पेट्रोल डीजल की कीमतें स्थिर। कांकेर नारायणपुर बॉर्डर पर आईईडी को निष्क्रिय करने के दौरान हुआ हादसा। पेट्रोल डीजल की कीमतें स्थिर। 2672 करोड़ रुपए की बैंक घोटाले। सीबीआई ने यूएई से प्रत्यर्पण के बाद कमलेश का प्रख्यात गीतकार प्रसून जोशी बने प्रसार भारती के नए अध्यक्ष। चेन्नई और मुंबई इंडियंस के बीच मुकाबला आज आईपीएल। पश्चिम बंगाल चुनाव 15 बूथों पर हुआ पुनर्मतदान। मगराहाट पश्चिम डायमंड हार्बर सीटों के बूथों पर हुआ पुनर्मतदान। टीएमसी को मतगणना प्रक्रिया से जुड़ी याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट से झटका। टीएमसी की याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट का दखल देने से इनकार। राज्य सरकार के नॉमिनी भी मतगणना में शामिल होंगे। संवैधानिक व्यवस्था में टीएमसी की कोई आस्था नहीं, भाजपा एक्सप्रेस। ममता बनर्जी को किसी पर भरोसा नहीं, मैं कुछ भी जनता का भरोसा। चुनाव आयोग रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर राज्य सरकार का कर्मचारी। नॉमिनी को लेकर आशंका नहीं होनी चाहिए थी। चुनाव आयोग। वैश्विक मुद्दे बंगाल मतगणना के लिए ईसीआई ने तैनात किए 165 अतिरिक्त सहायक। 77 पुलिस ऑब्जर्वर्स भेजे। काउंटिंग सेंटर पर निगरानी बढ़ी। कहाँ लहराएगा तिरंगा। नीति आयोग में 2 नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को पीएम ने दी मंजूरी। डॉक्टर बाला सुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर जोरामनिया की हुई नियुक्ति। जब देश पूछता है जवाब देना पड़ता है। मोबाइल आधारित आधार संचार प्रणाली का हुआ शुभारंभ। श्रीनगर वंदे भारत ट्रेन का संचालन आज से शुरू। सरहद से हुंकार पाकिस्तान, खबरदार सुदूर बारूद दुश्मन इस्लामाबाद। दलील नहीं सिर्फ छत्तीसगढ़। आईईडी ब्लास्ट में डीआरजी के 3 जवान शहीद, 1 घायल। कांकेर नारायणपुर बॉर्डर पर आईईडी को निष्क्रिय करने के दौरान हुआ हादसा। 172 करोड़ रुपए के बैंक घोटाले में फरार आरोपी कमलेश पर। सीबीआई ने यूएई से प्रत्यर्पण के बाद कमलेश को किया गिरफ्तार। प्रख्यात गीतकार प्रसून जोशी बने प्रसार भारती के नए अध्यक्ष। चेन्नई और मुंबई इंडियंस के बीच मुकाबला आज आईपीएल। पश्चिमी बंगाल चुनाव 15 बूथों पर हुआ पुनर्मतदान। मगराहाट पश्चिम डायमंड हार्बर सीटों के बूथों पर हुआ पुनर्मतदान। टीएमसी को मतगणना प्रक्रिया से जुड़ी याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट से झटका। टीएमसी की याचिका पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट का दखल देने से इनकार। राज्य सरकार के नॉमिनी भी मतगणना में शामिल होंगे। संवैधानिक व्यवस्था में टीएमसी की कोई आस्था नहीं, भाजपा एक्सप्रेस। ममता बनर्जी को किसी पर भरोसा नहीं, वह कुछ भी है जनता का भरोसा। चुनाव आयोग रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर राज्य सरकार का कर्मचारी। चुनाव आयोग नॉमिनी को लेकर आशंका नहीं होनी चाहिए। मतगणना के लिए ईसीआई ने तैनात किए 165 अतिरिक्त काउंटिंग चैम्बर। 70 पुलिस ऑब्जर्वर्स भी नियुक्त। काउंटिंग सेंटर पर निगरानी बढ़ी। नीति आयोग में 2 नए पूर्णकालिक सदस्यों की नियुक्ति को पीएम ने दी मंजूरी। डॉक्टर आर बाला सुब्रमण्यम और डॉक्टर जोरामनिया की हुई नियुक्ति। स्टार ओवर एमपी रेखा शर्मा रिमार्क्स फ्रॉम निशा। Protest erupted across Haryana on Friday after BJP Rajya Sabha MP Rekha Sharma allegedly made derogatory remarks against former Chief Minister Chaudhry Bhajan Lal. Supporters of Bhajan Lal and Kuldeep Bishnoi lodged a complaint in at least 16 districts seeking an FIR and strict action against the MP. Complaints were submitted to police in Bhiwani, Fatehpur, Gurugram, Jajjar, Jain, Kaithal, Kalai, Karnal, Kurukshetra, Mahendragarh, Nuh, Ambala, Panchkula, Panipat, Sonipat, Yamuna and Jalki Dadri. Protesters warned of intensifying the agitation if action is delayed. Student leaders shot at in Sonipat police section from Sonipat. The police encounter in Sonipat district has triggered a political and public outcry after two youths linked to a student organization were targeted during a joint police operation. One of them sustained a gunshot injury while the other was led. One the other was taken into custody. Three arrested in 1.8 lakh rupees getting a fraud from Kurukshetra. Youth beaten to death with brick from his arm. After drinks, man kills friend with tile from his arm. Two cops caught taking bribe to release bike from Rewari. Skull found outside police outpost from his arm. Kong Netan's son dies by suicide amid Sonipat civic call campaign from Sonipat. BJP expelled 8 in Ambala from Ambala. Amid the campaigning for the Ambala City Municipal Corporation elections, the BJP has expelled 8 of its members including workers and ticket aspirants for anti-party activities. Focus on civic issues in Sampla from Rohtak. With calling for the Sampla Municipal Committee on May 10, the focus has shifted from big political faces to core civic concerns, drinking water shortage, poor sanitation, and outdated sewage system and persistent property ID issues. High Court slams conferred for forced labor orders release of 7 years areas from Chandigarh. 593 crore rupees bank fraud, third official sacked, barred from applying for Haryana government jobs from Chandigarh. Point in reaching peace, let go of expectations. Peace can be had in two ways. When you have a comfortable sleep, you are peaceful, undisturbed, unaffected. Also, when you can compose your mind in meditation or contemplation, the mind becomes free of thoughts and brother, the mind becomes free of thoughts and botheration. You are led to peacefulness even though only for a short time. Sleep lasts for longer. The meditative composure, on the other hand, may have shorter spell. Its effect may linger for some time after you finish the session, but soon the mind gets caught up in worldly thoughts leading to agitation. As a contrast, there is another way of being peaceful in this time. You shall have peace, contentment, and joy without having to withdraw yourself from activities. You can be fully involved, having intense worldly pursuits, and yet be completely peaceful. This is what a good seeker should aim at, inquire, and pursue. For this, the mind must become pure. Several qualities must be viewed into it. Goodness should become the very nature of such a mind. This pursuit of purity and virtues, which directly brings peace to the mind, no matter whether the mind is active or inactive, is the ultimate quest for all religions, philosophy, spirituality, and beyond. Whenever you feel a lack of peace, understand that there is a cause behind it and look for it. Our Shastras and traditions have identified causes of lack of peace or mental agitation. Most of the ancient findings are true even today because our mind have remained basically the same. Our senses are the same, mind and psychology are the same, intelligence and its propensities are no different. One important quality that immediately best draws peace is anar- anarchista, anapexta, non-expectation. The mind should have no expectation, no desire. The second is amanikwam, lack of ego. The ego should not block the way to any kind of learning or improvement. You may have to incorporate several virtues. You may have to eliminate many vices, either by incorporating virtuous knots or by eliminating vices. Your ego should not give rise to undue resistance. Understand that virtues lead to your own excellence, expansion, and peace, and vices cause only constriction and torment. Our Shastras say, whenever truth is spoken, we must receive and thoughtfully evaluate it. And if something unreasonable is uttered even by Brahman, it must be rejected like a blade of grass. So, ego should not stand in the way of either incorporating virtue or eliminating a vice. This effacement of ego, which steers life towards purity and enlightenment, is important. The desires will only disturb the mind, and ego will constantly irritate and cause problems. If these two are kept away, being constantly watchful about their emergency, you will find a better, more permanent, and enriching peace than what you would have through meditation. Your peace will then coexist with your worldly activity and interactions. When did ordinary life becomes a disease? How overdiagnosis is making us feel worse. Neurologist and seizure expert Susan O'Sullivan often sees patients who already have 3 or 5 pre-existing diagnoses which don't yet have a cure in a medical ward racing pell-mell towards fancy new tests. She finds it very important to ask the patient what has happened to you that's different from what is wrong with you. Her book, The Age of Diagnosis, Sickness, Health, and Why Modern Medicine Has Gone Too Far, reminds us that we are all as different on the inside as we are on the outside. Every genetic test and every MRI can show abnormality. Such capabilities can make it difficult for anybody, any age, to consider themselves perfectly healthy. Plus, disease definitions keep expanding. When in 2000 C, American Diabetes Association lowered the threshold for normal glucose level in a fasting person from 6.1 millimoles per liter 0.16. It increased the number of pre-diabetics 2 to 3 fold. Drawing in elder cases is an overdiagnosis problem when high rates of disease detection don't deliver improvements in long-term health. A predictive diagnosis is actually only a warning about the future, but the woman in worry tells us about our life. A political rally had blocked her from picking up her child from school. When our life is interrupted like this without apology, our roads and time taken from us, why shouldn't we get angry? When I saw the video of the woman in Worli shouting at minister after a political rally, trapped her in traffic as she was trying to collect her child from school, I did not think how rude. I thought, what took her so long actually was taken all of us to so long. Siddharth Dhanwant Sangvi says, provides only the thrill of buying Uber exclusive stuff. Brand swallows and economists know this well. We premiumize and put greater value on things other people want and can't have simply because they can't afford them. It's in our very nature, and nothing solves this deep-seated need for them more than super exclusives. Aam Aadmi Khas identity. What our favorite mango reveals about who we are, from our childhood to our personality types. The French have their Bordeaux and Buzalas. We have our Alfonso and Lengda. There is a revealing symmetry in the way Indians relate to their foods. Dishes inspire loyalty, recipes inspire argument, ingredients inspire at best preference, but the mango, the arm, inspires something that has no clean category in the sociology of taste. It inspires selfhood, and selfhood, once attached to a fruit, is clinical condition masquerading as culture. The anthropology of food attachment in India follows a fairly predictable grammar. We identify with preparations, the biryani, the dal bati, the fish curry because preparations carry the signature of human intervention. Someone made this, someone's grandmother made this differently. And the argument has not ended. There are WhatsApp groups dedicated to less. The dish becomes a vessel for memory, technique, and belonging precisely because it required transformation. Culture leaves its fingerprint in the cooking, occasionally its ego. The mango breaks this grammar entirely. It arrives already finished, no knife improves it beyond the knife that opens it. No spice completes it. No grandmother's secret is required. Though grandmothers will insert themselves anyway along with unsolicited dietary advice, and yet the mango generates fiercer elegance than almost any dish in the Indian repertoire. We have conferred the status of craft upon something that asks for none, which suggests the mango is not loved for what it is. It is loved for what it represents, and what it represents in place, and what it represents in place. Irreducibly, stubbornly, translatively place. The French have a word for this, terroir. Terroir, the idea that geography is not merely backdrop but ingredient. That the soil, the rain, the specific coastal area enter the thing grown in it and cannot be extracted from the experience of consuming it. Wine culture built an entire civilization around this, then an entire tourism industry, then an entire personality type at dinner party who say things like knots of oak with alarming confidence. India arrived at the same truth independently earlier with mangoes and without bothering to theorize it because we were too busy eating and arguing loudly in trains. Cylindrical vision. What India must learn from the LPG crisis. Commercial LPG price had been hiked before, in fact during the Hormuz crisis, but yesterday increase captures the true extent of supply disruption. A 48% increase from is unprecedented. Obviously, there are limits to the cushion government can provide. When war broke out on Feb 28, many tankers were at sea. Gas kept arriving through March, although Hormuz was closed, but April, as PUI reported yesterday, has been a difficult month, especially on the LPG front. Imports of this fuel halved from 2 million tons a month to less than 1 million tons. That left a huge supply hole despite Indian refiners increasing LPG production by 30%. So far, households which use 24% of LPG have been spared. But if the blockade continues, they should brace for pain. A sharp price increase could undo years of efforts to cause millions of poor households to use clean fuel. The same risk exists with commercial LPG. Beyond restaurants, LPGs become the preferred fuel in industries like ceramics. In fact, before the war, commercial LPG use was growing twice as fast as household use. India is trying to get more LPG from US now, but it costs more to ship and takes longer to arrive. May's dispatches wouldn't arrive before July, even crude isn't as easily available as steady pump prices suggest. Last month, India averaged imports of only 4.4 million barrels per day, down from 5.2 million BPD in Feb. No doubt this crisis will end at some point and fuel prices will tumble eventually. But each day until then will be drag on the economy. That's why India must plan for resilience. Hydrocarbons will, of course, remain crucial as industrial feedstock. But transport, cooking, heating, power generation, these sectors should be wind urgently, nuclear, renewables, and biofuels. Our content of waste and waiting to be gasified. The solutions already exist. State-run banks hire over 50K in final year 26, a rise of 33% from New Delhi. April GST collection hit record 2.4 lakh crore rupees from New Delhi. Amazon's Q-com monthly orders in India rise 25% from Bangalore. GTRI India supplies 20% of global generic medicines from New Delhi. Viva Toys Global to invest 1,000 crore rupees. We are creating an ecosystem where we will manufacture our own PCBs, motors, and batteries used in toys with the goal of reducing dependence on imports over time. Vishal Nahar, MD, Viva Toys Global says. Government to sustain capex push despite fiscal stress from official New Delhi. FPI outflows hit 1.9 lakh crore rupees in first 4 months of 2026 New Delhi. EV sales rise 27% in April cause right benefit of GST 2.0. Repo rate cut, repo rate cut, income tax gain also help boost purchases from Delhi. No need secure to check its dropout rate from Chandigarh. Karnal constituency to get 40 modern villages, Khattar says from Chandigarh. Union Minister Nolal Khattar on Friday said 40 villages in Karnal parliamentary constituency would be developed as model villages. The constituency, represented by Khattar, spans Karnal and Panipat district. He made the announcement during his 3-day outreach program to review development and other projects started by the state and union government. During the day, Khattar held back-to-back review meetings and public interaction programs. He met representatives at the Karnal Jilla Parishad office, reviewing the progress of development projects and welfare schemes. He instructed officials to implement schemes in an effective, transparent, and time-bound manner. The minister has adopted nearly 4 dozen villages in the constituency where he personally monitors development works, set, including setting up e-libraries and gymnasium. Kanal MLA Jagmohan Anand said Qatar's close monitoring of both small and major issues not only strengthens the organization but also helps accelerate development. Umar denies plan to drop Urdu in revenues jobs from Srinagar. JNK Chief Minister Umar Abdullah denied Friday having issued any order to remove Urdu from some revenue department jobs. Portion of bridge collapses in Jammu for laborers trapped from Jammu. Praise Murmu visits. President Murmu visits our track concludes 5 day Himachal tour from Shimla. President Draupadi Murmu visited the headquarters of the Army Training Command in Shimla on Friday before returning to New Delhi, making the conclusion of her 5 day visit to Himachal Pradesh. High Court seeks SP government reply on DA plea by employees from Shimla. Shah meets Ladakh leaders' key demands see no breakthrough from Srinagar. Environmentalist and Leh Apex body member Sonam Wangchuk and co-chairman P. Sering Dorje Laku met Union Home Minister Amit Shah in Delhi, but failed to get approval on key demands linked to talks with the center on the Union territory of Ladakh. Union Power Secretary opened bridge at Khera from Shimla. Rain triggers cave-in blocks Monday. Pathankot Highway orange alert issued for May 3 for Shimla. Minor avalanche hits Chamba route, stalls repair from Chamba. Nandur Madhyameshwar turns pink as flamingos descend in peak summer from Nasik. High Court says child's welfare is paramount, not foreign court's order from Indore, starting that a child welfare and not a foreign court's order is paramount, and citing the Ramayana story of Love Kush. The Madhya Pradesh High Court has refused to send a 10-year-old girl to Canada to join her father. Above normal range likely to keep May heat in check IMD. Some states may see more heat wave from New Delhi. Many parts of the country may not be hotter than usual this month due to above normal rainfall, but certain states, especially those along foothills of the Himalayas, such as southern parts of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, along with eastern coast and some parts of Maharashtra and Gujarat, are likely to face above normal heat wave days, according to the IMD's forecast for May released on Friday. Watchers held trying to save leopards' skin for ripe fruit. No stop, no queue tolling gets a free flow makeover. Multi-lane free flow system implemented by the IHMSCL this Friday will allow vehicles to cruise through toll plazas, promising faster travel and lower congestion. Policy to push floating solar projects on anvil. UP boy breaks finger of left hand, post plasters right from Agra. Supreme Court grants anticipatory bail to Pawan Khera from New Delhi. The Supreme Court has granted anticipatory bail to Congress leader Pawan Khera in a case related to making allegations against Assam Chief Minister Himant Vishwa Sharma's wife, saying the matter appears to have stemmed from political rivalry. The bench of Justice J.K. Maheshwari and A.S. Chandurkar, in its order uploaded on Friday, granted the pre-arrest bail to Khera, subject to certain conditions. The court had on Thursday reserved its verdict in the matter. The right to personal liberty is a cherished fundamental right, and any deprivation thereof must be justified on a higher threshold, particularly where the surrounding circumstances may indicate the presence of political overtones, the court said. The appellant Khera is directed to be released on anticipatory bail in the event of his arrest in the crime branch police station and on such reasonable terms and conditions which may be put by the investigating officer as deemed fit, it directed. Government mandates video inspection safety checklist for every bus. Officials said the checklist and wide inspection are aimed at ensuring passenger safety and prevent bus fires which caused several deaths in recent months to be enforced through Central Viru zone from New Delhi. UP boy breaks finger of left hand, horse plaster right from Agra. WH opposes Anthropic plan to expand MITS access. The White House opposed a plan by Anthropic BC to expand access to its MITS AI model on administration officials said Wednesday night. Members of President Donald Trump's administration have told Anthropic that they don't agree with the company's plan to grant access to its Mythos technology to roughly 70 companies and organizations, according to the official, who requested anonymity. The misgiving regarding Mythos, a technology that the company says is powerful enough to enable dangerous cyber attacks, were reported earlier by the Wall Street Journal. US officials are worried that Anthropic doesn't have enough computing power to solve more methods users without affecting the government's ability to use it effectively. According to the journal which cited unnamed sources, the US National Security Agency has been testing the capabilities of Mythos to find cybersecurity vulnerabilities in popular software, including Microsoft products, according to a US official and another person familiar with the matter. Humanoid maker 1X opens new US factory to build 10K home robots. Taiwan's economy surges at fastest pace since 1987 on AI boom. Taiwan economy grew at its fastest in 1987. Canada to raise financial bar for international student applicants. Standing committee in Canada had proposed a sweeping 10-point tightening of its international student program, including high financial threshold requirement for students, country-based paths, and stricter institutional oversight. The move signals a decisive shift towards a more selective system that could significantly impact Indian students, the largest cohort. UK Islamic sect members arrested over sexual abuse slavery allegations from London. Over 500 police officers raided an Islamic sect on Wednesday and arrested 10 members for various offences, including rape, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Officers, under the watch of a helicopter, raided the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. He headquartered he headquarters situated at a former orphanage. Warehouse crew where around 150 adults and children live along with two other properties at 8:50 a.m. local time. Venezuela signed oil gas deal with US companies. Venezuela signed deal with US companies on Thursday in a bid to boost oil and gas production, the latest sign of trying relation after Washington because leftist leader Nicolas Maduro. Psychologist in Maradona death trial says Soction did had bipolar disorder. Psychologists charged in the trial over Diego Maradona's death told an Argentina court on Thursday that the Soction did more had bipolar disorder. UK exports to US launched as tariffs by official data. British exports to the United States have slowed since the introduction of US tariffs. Officials data showed Friday, day after President Donald Trump lifted import taxes on Scottish whiskey. UK man appeared in court over stabbing of two Jewish men in London. The 45-year-old man appeared in a London court on Friday charged with attempted murder over an attack during which two Jewish men were stabbed in Golders Green, North London, in what police are treating as a terrorist incident. In its wake, government officials raised the national terrorism threat to its second highest level, meaning a terrorist attack is highly likely within the next 6 months. Studying at Washington State High School in Georgia, from Tacoma. As Trump nukes, science is India's brain ready for brain again. Desi expert groups on social media are boiling with questions about relocation to India, including about children, schools, and financial transfers from Washington. He thinks diet soda kills cancer cells when consumed because it scorches grass when Gordon he claimed no song between causes cancer. He most famously used about injecting disinfectants into the body to kill the COVID virus. In his latest, US President Donald Trump has landed with unusual force, the wholesale dismissal of the National Science Board. In his latest, US President Donald Trump has landed with unusual force. The wholesale dismissal of the National Science Board, the independent 22-member body, including three Indian Americans that oversee the National Science Foundation, America's primary engine for funding basic research. Among those removed were the three prominent scientists of Indian origin. Middle East conflict redraws sea routes with Africa as a pivot. Saudi port of Jeddah on Red Sea becomes new regional hub from Paris. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz as well as tension in the Red Sea are reshaping trade routes, with Africa becoming a hub of global container ship traffic according to logistics and maritime sources over the past 2 months. The blockade has also pushed ship owners to find alternative land corridors to deliver foodstuffs and manufactured goods by truck as they can no longer reach the Gulf's coastal countries by sea. The Saudi port of Jeddah, the Saudi port of Jeddah on the Red Sea is becoming a new regional hub where ships from maritime giants MSC, CMC, CGM, merchant first arrived by the Suez Canal. Cargo then leaves by truck along a desert highway to deliver to places such as Sharjah, Bahrain, and Kuwait, which have not been served by sea for the past 2 months. The port of Jeddah is not at all sized to handle such import volumes, and a port congestion situation is emerging. Stir over MP Kashima Shima, student leaders shot at Infantry Police Station. From Nepal, Sundial by suicide against Shanibar, civil call campaign from Shanibar. Beaumont and Flashes, the age of Elizabeth. The work of these men is so closely true that though Fletcher outlived Beaumont by 9 years and the leader had no hand in some 40 of the plays that bear their joint names, we still class them together. Only scholars attempt to separate their works so as to give each writer his due share. Unlike most of the Elizabethan dramatists, they both came from noble and cultured families and were university trained. Their work, in strong contrast with Johnson, is intentionally romantic, and in it all, how your cause or brutal the scene, there is still, as Emerson pointed out, the subtle recognition of gentility. Beaumont, born in 1584 and died in 1660, was the brother of Sir Johann Beaumont of Leicestershire. From Oxford, he came to London to study law, but soon gave it up to write for the stage. Fletcher, born in 1579 and died in 1625, was the son of the Bishop of London and shows in all his work the influence of his high social position and of his Cambridge education. The two dramatists met at the Mermaid Tavern under Ben Jonson's leadership and soon became inseparable friends, living and working together. Tradition has it that Beaumont supplied the judgment and the solid work of the play, while Fletcher furnished the high-colored sentiment and the lyric poetry, without which an Elizabethan play would have been incomplete. Of their joint plays, the two best known are Philaster, whose old theme, like that of Cymbeline and Priscilla, is the jealousy of a lover and a faithfulness of a girl. And the man's tragedy concerning Fletcher's work, the most interesting literary question is how much did he write of Shakespeare's Henry VIII, and how much did Shakespeare help him in the pre-novel Kinsman? John Webster of Webster's personal history. We know nothing except that he was well known as a dramatist under James I. His extraordinary powers of expression rank him with Shakespeare, but his talent seems to have been largely devoted to the blood and thunder play written by Marlowe. His two best known plays are The White Devil, published in 1612, and The Duchess of Malfi, published in 1623. The latter, in spite of its horrors, ranks him as one of the greatest masters of English tragedy. It must be remembered that he sought in this play to reproduce the Italian life of the 16th century, and for this, no imaginary horrors are needed. The history of an Italian court or city in this period furnishes more vice and violence and dishonor than even the gloomy imagination of Webster could conceive. All the so-called tragedies of the Elizabethan period, from Comscript, Spanish tragedy down, however much they may condemn the brutal taste of the English audiences, are still only so many searchlights so thrown upon a history of horrible darkness. Thomas Middleton, born in 1570 and died in 1627. Middleton is best known by two great plays, The Changeling and Women, Beware Women. In poetry and diction, they are almost worthy, as times, to rank with Shakespeare's play. Otherwise, in their sensationalism and unnaturedness, they do violence to the moral sense and are repulsive to the modern reader. Two earlier plays, a trick to catch the old one, with best comedy and a fair quarrel. His earliest tragedy are less mature in thought and expression, but more readable because they seem to express Middleton's own idea of the drama rather than that of a corrupt court and playwrights of his large age. Thomas Heywood, who born in 1580 and died in 1650, Heywood's life, of which we know little in detail, covers the whole period of the Elizabethan drama. To the glory of that drama, he contributed, according to his own statement, the greater part, at least of nearly 220 plays. It was an enormous amount of work, but he seems to have been animated by the modern literary spirit of following the best market and striking while the financial iron is hot. Naturally, good work was impossible even to genius. Under such circumstances, and few of his plays are now known, the two best. If the reader would obtain his own idea of Haywood's undoubted ability are a woman killed with kindness, a pathetic story of domestic life, and the fair maid of the West, a melodrama with plenty of fighting of the popular kind. Thomas Dekker, born in 1570. Dekker is in pleasing contrast with most of the dramatists of the time. All we know of him must be inferred from his works. They show a happy and sunny nature, pleasant and good to meet. The reader will find the best expression of Decker's personality and creative genius in the Shoemaker's Holiday. A humorous study of plain working people and old pursuits, a fairy drama of the pushing head and no end of money. Whether intended for children or not, it had the effect of charming the elders far more than the young people, and the play became immensely popular. Messenger for Shelley. These three men marked the end of the Elizabethan drama. They were done lastly while the struggle was on between the actors and the corrupt court on one side and the Puritans on the other, shows a deliberate turning away not only from Puritan standards but from the high ideals of their own art to pander to the corrupt taste of the upper classes. Philip Messenger, born in 1584 and died in 1640, was a dramatic poet of great natural ability, but his plots and situations are usually so strained and artificial that the modern reader finds no interest in them. In his best comedy, A New Way to Pay Old Debts, he achieved great popularity and gave us one figure, Sir Giles Overditch, which is one of the typical characters of the English stage. His best plays are The Great Duke of Florence, The Virgin Martyr, and The Maid of Honor. John Ford, who born in 1586 and died in 1642, and James Shelley, who born in 1596 and died in 1666, have left us little or permanent literary value, and their works are read only by those who wish to understand the whole rise and fall of this drama. An occasional scene in Ford's play is as strong as anything that Elizabethan age produced, but as a whole, the plays are unnatural and tiresome. Probably his best play is The Broken Heart, 1633. Shelley was given to imitation of his predecessors, and his very imitation is characteristic of an age which had lost its inspiration. A single play, High the Park, with its frivolous realistic dialogue, is sometimes read for its reflection of the fashionable gossipy talk of the day. Long before Shelley's death, the actor shared farewell. Othello's occupations gone, Parliament voted to close the theatres, thereby saving the drama from a more glorious death by dissipation. The prose writers Francis Bacon, who born in 1561 and died in 1626. In Bacon, we see one of those complex and contradictory natures, which are the despair of the biographer. If the writer be an admirer of Bacon, he finds too much that he must excuse or pass over in silence. But if he takes his stand on the Lord to condemn the avarice and dishonesty of his subject, he finds enough moral courage and nobility to make him question the justice of his own judgment. On the one hand is Ralph Ben Johnson's tribute to his power and ability, and on the other, Hallam's summary that he was a man who, being entrusted with the highest gifts of heaven, habitually abused them for the poorest purposes of power, hired them out for guineas, places, and titles in the service of injustice, covetousness, and oppression. Laying aside the opinion of others and relying only upon the facts of Bacon's life, we find on the one side, the politician called calculating, selfish, and on the other hand, the literary and scientific man with an impressive devotion to truth for its own great sake. Here, a man using questionable means to advance his own interest, and they remain seeking with zeal and endless labor to penetrate the secret ways of nature with no other object than to advance the interest of his fellow men. So, in our ignorance of the secret motives and springs of the man's life, judgment is necessarily suspended. Bacon was apparently one of those double natures that only God is complete, that God that only God is competent to judge. Because of the strange mixture of intellectual strength and moral weakness that is in them. How was the life of Bacon? Bacon was the son of Sir Nicholas Bacon, Lord Keeper of the Street, and of the learned Anne Cook, and the learned Anne Cook, sister-in-law to Lord Burleigh. Greatest of the Queen's status man from these connections as well as from native gifts. He was attracted to the court and as a child was called by Elizabeth her little Lord Keeper. At 12 he went at 12 he went to Cambridge but left the university after 2 years, declaring the whole plan of education to be radically wrong. And the system of Aristotle, which was the basis of all philosophy in those days, to be a childish delusion, since in the course of centuries it had produced no fruit but only a jungle of dry and useless branches, staying even for a sophomore of 14, thus to condemn the whole system of the university. But such was the boy and the system. Next year, in order to continue his education, he accompanied the English ambassador to France, where he is said to have where he is said to have busied himself chiefly with the practical studies of statistics and diplomacy. 2 years later, he was recalled to London by the death of his father. Without money and naturally with expensive taste, he applied to his uncle Walid for a lucrative position. It was in this application that he used the expression so characteristic of the Elizabethan age that he used the expression so characteristic of the Elizabethan age that he had taken all knowledge for his province. The league who misjudged him as a dreamer and self-seeker not only refused to help him at the court but successfully opposed his advancement by Elizabeth. Bacon then took up the study of law and was admitted to the bar in 1582 that he had not lost his philosophy in the message of the law shown by the tract written about this time on the greatest birth of time, which was a plea for his inductive system of philosophy, reasoning from many facts to one law, rather than from an assumed law to particular facts. This was the deductive method that had been in use for centuries. In his famous plea for progress, Bacon demanded three things: the free investigation of nature, the discovery of facts instead of theories, and the verification of results by experiment rather than by argument. In our day, they are the ABC of science. But in Bacon's time, they seemed revolutionary. As a lawyer, he became immediately successful. As a lawyer, he became immediately successful. His knowledge and power of pleading became widely known, and it was almost at the beginning of his career that Johnson thought the fear of everyone that heard him speak was that he should make an end. The publication of his essays added greatly to his fame, but Bacon was not content. His head was buzzing with huge schemes, the purification, the pacification of unhappy Ireland, the simplification of English law, the reform of the church, the study of nature, the establishment of a new philosophy. Meanwhile, sad to say, he played the game of politics for his personal advantage. He devoted himself to Essex, the young and dangerous favorite of the Queen, won his friendship and then used him skillfully to better his own position. When the earth was tried for treason, it was partly atlas to Bacon's efforts that he was convicted and beheaded. And though Bacon claims to have been actuated by a high sense of justice, we are not convinced that he understood either justice or friendship in appearing as keen counsel against the man who had befriended him. His cold-bloodedness and lack of moral sensitiveness appear even in his essays on love and friendship. Indeed, we can understand his life only upon the theory that his intellectuality left him cold and dead to the highest sentiments of our humanity. During Elizabeth's reign, Bacon had sought repeatedly for high office, but had been blocked by Bali and perhaps also by the Queen's own shrewdness in judging men. With the advent of James I, 1603, Bacon devoted himself to the new ruler and rose rapidly in favor. He was slighted and soon afterwards attained another object of his ambition in marrying a rich wife. The appearance of his great work, the advancement of learning in 1605, was largely the result of the mental stimulus produced by his change in fortune. In 1613, he was made Attorney General, and speedily made enemies by using the office to increase his personal end. He justified himself in his cause by his devotion to the king's cause and by the belief that the higher his position and the more ample his means, the more he could do for science. It was in this year that Bacon wrote his series of state papers, which show a marvelous grasp of the political tendencies of his day. Had his advice been followed, it would have certainly averted the struggle between king and parliament that followed speedily. In 1617, he was appointed to his father's office, Lord Keeper of the Seal, and the next year to the high office of the Lord Chancellor. With this office, he received the title of Baron Barundum and later Lord Viscount St. Alban, which he affixed with some vanity to his literary work. 2 years later appeared his greatest work, the Novum Organum, called after Aristotle's famous Organum. Bacon did not long enjoy his political honors. The storm which had been long gathering against James' government broke suddenly upon Bacon's head. When Parliament assembled in 1621, it vented its distrust of James and his favorite Villiers by striking unexpectedly at their chief advisor. Bacon was sternly accused of accepting bribes, and the evidence was so great that he confessed that there was much political corruption abroad in the land, that he was personally guilty of some of it, and he was sued, and he threw himself upon the mercy of his judges. Parliament at that time was in no mood for mercy. Bacon was deprived of his office and was sentenced to pay the enormous fine of £40,000, to be imprisoned during the king's pleasure and thereafter to be banished forever from Parliament and court. Though the imprisonment lasted only a few days and the fine was largely remitted, Bacon's hopes and schemes for political honors were ended, and it is at this point of appearing adversity that the nobility in the man's nature asserts itself strongly. With the reader being trusted to apply a great man's philosophy to his own life, we will find the essay of great place most interesting in this connection. Bacon now withdrew permanently from public life and devoted his splendid ability to literary and scientific work. He completed the essays, experimented largely, wrote history, scientific articles, and one scientific novel, and made additions to his Instonesia Magna, the great philosophical work which was never finished. In the spring of 1626, while driving in snowstorm, it occurred to him that snow might be used as a preservative instead of salt. True to his own method of arriving at truth, he stopped at the first house, got a fowl, and proceeded to test his theory. The experiment chilled him, and he died soon after from the effects of his exposure. As Macaulay wrote, the great apostle of experimental philosophy was destined to be its martyr works of Bacon. Bacon philosophic works, the advancement of learning and the novum organum will be best understood in connection with the Instauratio Magna. Instauratio Magna, or the great institution of true philosophy, of which they were parts. The Instauratio was never completed, but the very idea of the work was magnificent. To see Kami the involved philosophy of the schoolman, and the educational systems of the university, and to substitute a single great work, which should be complete education, a rich storehouse for the glory of the Creator and for the relief of man's state. The object of this education was to bring practical results to all the people instead of a little selfish culture and much useless speculation which he conceived were the only products of the university. The Instauratio Magna, this was the most ambitious, though it is not the best known of Bacon was, for the insight it gave us into the author's mind. We note here a brief outline of his subject. It was divided into six parts as follows: partitions, scientirum, partition, scientirum. This was to be classification and summary of all human knowledge, philosophy, and all speculation must be cast out, and the natural sciences established as the basis of all education. The only part completed was the advancement of learning, which served as an introduction. Novum organum, or the new instrument, that is the use of the reason and experiment instead of the old Aristotelian logic. To find truth, one must to do two things: get rid of all prejudices or idols, as Bacon called them. These idols are called idols of the tribe, that is, prejudices due to common methods of thought among all races. Idols of the king or den, that is, personal peculiarities and prejudices. Idols of the marketplace, due to errors of language, and idols of the theatre, which are the unreliable traditions of men. After, after discarding the above idols, we must interrogate nature, must collect facts by means of numerous experiments, arrange them in order, and then determine the law that underlies them. It will be seen at a glance that the above is the most important of Bacon's works. The organum was to be in several books, only two of which he completed, and these he rewrote 12 times until they satisfied him. Historia Naturalis and Experimentalis, the study of all the phenomena of nature. Of four parts of this work, which he completed, one of them at least, the Silva Silverum, is decidedly at a variance with his own ideas of fact and experiment. It abounds in fanciful explanations more worthy of the poetic than of the scientific mind. Nature is seen to be full of the desires and instincts. The ear thirsts for light and fragrance. Bodies rise to sing because they have an appetite for height or depth. The qualities of bodies are the result of an essence, so that when we discover the essences of the gold and silver and diamonds, it will be a simple matter to create as much of them as we may need. Scala intellectus, or ladder of the mind, is the rational application of the organum to all problems by the mind should ascend step by step from particular facts and instances to general laws and abstract principles. Prodromy, the prophecies on anticipation, is a list of discoveries that men shall make when they have applied Bacon's methods of study and experimentation. Philosophia Secunda, which was to be recorded of practical results of the new philosophy, when the succeeding ages should have applied it faithfully. It is impossible to regard even the outline of such a vast work without an involuntary seal of admiration for the world and original mind which conceived it. We may shall Bacon make no despicable beginnings. The destinies of the human race must complete the work. Whereupon this will depend only not on the speculating good but on the fortunes of mankind and of their power. There is the unconscious expression of one of the great minds of the world. Bacon was like one of the architects of the Middle Ages, who drew his plan for a mighty cathedral, perfect in every detail from the deep foundation stone to the cross of the highest spire, and who gave over his plans to the builders, knowing that in his own lifetime only one tiny chapel would be completed, but knowing also that the very beauty of his plans would appeal to others and that succeeding ages would finish the work which he dared to begin. The Ashes Bacon famous Ashes is the one work which will interest all students of our literature. His in scenario, his in his stereo wall in Latin, written mostly by paid helpers from short English texts. He regarded Latin as the only language worthy of a great work, but the world neglected his Latin to seize upon his English. Marvel's English thus pity left with thought in an age that used endless circumlocutions. The first 10 ashes published in 1597 were brief notebook jottings of Bacon's observation. Their success astonished the author, but not till 15 years later were they republished and last. Their charm grew upon Bacon himself, and during his retirement he gave was thought to the wonderful language which he had at first despised as much as Aristotle's philosophy. In 1612 appeared a second edition containing 38 essays, and in 1625, the year before his death, he published the essays in their present form, polishing and enlarging the original 10 to 58, covering a wide variety of subjects suggested by the life of men around him. Concerning the best of these essays, there are as many opinions as there are readers, and what one gets out of them depends largely upon his own thought and intelligence. In this respect, they are like that nature to which Bacon directed man with thoughts. The whole volume may be read through in an evening, but after one has read them a dozen times, we still find that many places to pause and reflect as at the first reading. If one must choose out of such a storehouse, we would suggest studies, goodness, wishes, atheism, unity in the reason, adversity, friendship, and great place. As an introduction to Bacon's worldly wise philosophy, miscellaneous works. Other works of Bacon are interesting and revelation of the Elizabethan mind rather than because of any literary value. The New Atlantis is a kind of scientific novel describing another utopia as seen by Bacon. The inhabitants of Atlantis have banished philosophy and applied Bacon's method of investigating nature. Using the results to better their own condition, they have a wonderful civilization in which many of our later discoveries, academies of the sciences, observatories, balloon, submarines, the modification of species, and several others were foreshadowed with a strange mixture of cold reason and poetic intuition. De Sapientia Veteran is a fanciful attempt to show the deep meaning underlying ancient myths, a meaning which would have astonished the myth makers themselves. The history of Henry VII is a calm, dispassionate, and remarkably accurate history which makes us regret that Bacon did not do more historical work. Besides, these are mythical versions of certain psalms, which are valuable in view of the controversy among Shakespeare's plays for showing Bacon's utter inability to write poetry and a large number of letters and statements showing the range and power of his intellect. Bacon plays and work. Although Bacon was for the great part of his life a busy man of affairs, one cannot read his work without becoming conscious of two things: a perennial freshness, which the world insists upon in all literature that is no endure, and an intellectual power which makes him as one of the great minds of the world. Of late, the general tendency is to give less and less prominence to his work in science and philosophy, but criticism of his instauratio in view of his lofty aim is of small consequence. It is true that in science today seems woefully inadequate. True also that though he sought to discover truth, he thought perhaps to monopolize it, and so looked with same suspicion upon Copernicus as upon the philosopher. The practical man who despises philosophy has simply misunderstood the thing he despises. In being practical and experimental in a romantic age, he was not unique, as is often Alice, but only expressed the tendency of the English mind in all ages. 3 centuries earlier, the monk Robert Bacon did more practical experimenting than the Elizabethan saga and the later famous idols are strongly suggestive of the former four sources of human ignorance. Although Bacon did not make any of the scientific discoveries at which he aimed, yet the whole spirit of his work, especially of the organum, had strongly influenced science in the direction of accurate observation and of carefully testing every theory by practical experiment. He that regardeth the clouds shall not show, said the wise writer of world, and Bacon turned men's thoughts from the heavens above, which, with which they had been too busy, to the earth beneath, which they had too much neglected. In an age when men were busy with romance and philosophy, he insisted that the first object of education is to make a man familiar with his natural environment. From books, he turned to man, from theory to fact, from philosophy to nation, and that is perhaps his greatest contribution to life and literature. Like Moses upon Pisgah, he stood high enough above his fellows to look out over a promised land which his people would inherit, but into which he himself might never enter. Richard Hooker, born in 1554, died in 1600. In strong contrast with Bacon and Richard Hooker, one of the greatest prose writers of the Elizabethan age, one must read the story of his life, an obscure and cloudy life animated by a great spirit, as told by Isaac Walton. To appreciate the full force of this contrast, Bacon took all knowledge for his province but mastered no single part of it. Hooker, taking a single theme, the law and practice of the English Church, so handled it that no scholar, even of the present day, would dream of superseding it or of building upon any other foundation than that which Hooker laid down. His one great work is the Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity, a theological and argumentative book, but entirely apart from its subject. It will be read wherever men desire to hear the power and stateliness of the English language. Here is a single sentence remarkable not only for its perfect form, but also for its expression of the reverence for law, which lies at the heart of Anglo-Saxon civilization. Of law, there can be no less acknowledged than that her seat in the bosom of God, her voice and harmony of the word, all things in heaven and earth do her homage. The very breeze stands feeling her care, and the greatest is not exempted from his power. Both angels and men, and creatures of what condition so ever, though each in different sort and manner, yet all with uniform concern, admiring her as the mother of their peace and joy. Sydney and Ridley. Among the prose writers of this wonderful literary age, there are many other that deserve passing notice, though they fall far below the standard of Bacon and Hooker. Sir Philip Sidney, 1554 to 1586, who has already been considered as a poet, is quite as well known by his prose works, Arcadia, with pastoral romance, and the debuts of poetic, one of our earliest literary essays. Sidney, whom the poet Shelley had eulogized, represents the whole romantic tendency of his age. While Sir Walter Raleigh, 1552 to 1618, represents its adventurous spirit and activity. The life of Raleigh is an almost incomprehensible mixture of the poet, scholar, and adventurer, now helping the Huguenots or the struggling Dutch in Europe, and now leading an expedition into the unmapped wilds of the New World. Busy here with court intrigues and with piratical attempt to capture the gold-laden Spanish galleons. One moment sailing the high seas in utter freedom, and the next writing history and poetry to solace his imprisonment. Such a life in itself is a volume far more interesting than anything that he wrote. He is the restless spirit of Elizabethan is personified. William's chief prose works are the discoveries of Guiana, a work which would certainly have been interesting enough had he told simply what he saw, but which was filled with colonization schemes and versions of the El Dorado to fill the eyes and ears of the credulous and the history of the world writers to occupy his prison hours. The history is a wholly untrustworthy account of events from creation to the downfall of the Macedonian Empire. It is interesting chiefly for its style, which is simple and dignified, and for the flashes of wit and poetry that break into the fantastic combination of miracles, tradition, hearsay, and state records, which he called history. In the conclusion is the famous apostrophe to death, which suggests that Raleigh might have done had he lived less strenuously and written more carefully. O eloquent, just, and mighty death, whom none could advise, thou hast persuaded, what none hath dared thou hast done, and whom all the world hath flattered, thou only hast cast out of the world and disguised. Thou hast drawn together all the strong, stressed greatness, all the pride, cruelty, and ambition of man, and covered it all over with these two narrow words, hic jacet. John Fox, 1516. He born in 1516 and died in 1587. Fox will be remembered always for his famous book of Martyr, a book that our elders gave to us on Sunday when we were young, thinking it would discipline for us to edit our souls when we wanted to be roaming the sunlit fields or when in our enforced idleness we would, if our own tastes in the matter had been consulted, have made good shift to be quiet and happy with Robinson Crusoe. So we have a gloomy memory of fox and something of events which prevent a just appreciation of his worth. Foxe had been driven out of England by the marine persecutions and in a wandering but diligent life on the constituent continent, he conceived the idea of writing a history of the persecution of the church from the earliest days to his own. The part relating to England and Scotland was published in Latin in 1559 under a title as sonorous and impressive as the Roman office for the dead, Rerum in Ecclesia Gestrum Maxi Macuper European Persecution Commentarium. On his return to England, Foxe translated this work, calling it the Ancient Monuments, but it soon became known as the Book of Martyrs, and so it will always be called. Fox's own bitter experience causes him to write with more heat and indignation than his saintly theme would warrant, and the holy tone. Sometimes showing a narrative that would be impressive in its bare simplicity. Nevertheless, the book has made for itself a secure place in our literature. It is strongest in its record of humble men like Roland Taylor and Thomas Hawkins, whose sublime heroism, but for this narrative, would have been lost amid the great name and the great events that filled the Elizabethan age. Camden and Knox, two historians, William Camden and John Knox, stand out prominently among the numerous historical writers of the age. Camden, Britannia, 1586, is a monumental work which marks the beginning of true Antiquarian research in the field of history, and his Annals of Queen Elizabeth is worthy of a far higher praise than has thus far been given it. John Knox, the reformer, in his history of the Reformation in Scotland, has some very vivid portraits of his helpers and enemies. The personal and aggressive elements enter too strongly for a work of history, but the autobiographical parts show great literary power. His account of his famous interview with Mary Queen of Scots is clear cut as a cameo and shows the man extraordinary power better than a whole volume of biography. Such scenes make one wish that more of his time had been given to literary work rather than to the disputes and troubles of his own Scotch birth. Hackle youth and perchance two editors of his age have made for themselves an enviable place in our literature. They are Richard Hapluke, 1552 to 1616, and Samuel Burchard, 1575 to 1626. Hakluyt was a clergyman who, in the midst of his little parish, set himself to achieve two great patriotic ends: to promote the wealth and commerce of his country, and to preserve the memory of all his countrymen who added to the glory of the realm by their livings, by their travels and exploration. To further the first object, he concerned himself deeply with the commercial interest of the East India Company, with its colonizing plan in Virginia and with the translation of De Soto's travels in America. To further the second, he made himself familiar with books of voyages in all foreign languages and with the brief reports of exploration of his own countrymen. Its principal navigation, voyages, and discoveries of the English nation. In three volumes appeared first in 1589 and a second edition followed in 1598 to 1600. The first volume tells of voyages to the north, the second to the India and the east, the third, which is as large as the other two, to the New World, with the exception of the very first voyage, that of King Arthur to Iceland in 517, which is founded on a myth. All the voyages are authentic accounts of the explorers themselves and are immensely interesting reading even at the present day. No other book of travels has so well expressed the spirit and energy of the English race, or better, deserves a place in our literature. Samuel Purchard, who was also a clergyman, continued the work of Hakluyt, using many of the latest unpublished manuscripts and condensing the records of numerous other voyages. His first famous book, Purchard, his pilgrimage, appeared in 1613 and was followed by Hakluyt's posthumous or Purchard, his pilgrimage in 1625. The very name inclines one to open the book with pleasure, and when one follows his inclination, which is after all one of the best guides in literature, he is rarely disappointed, though it falls far below the standard of Hakluyt, both in accuracy and literary finish. There is still plenty to make one glad that the book was written and that he can now comfortably follow Purchas on his pilgrimage. Thomas Knott, among the translators of the Elizabethan age, Sir Thomas Knott, 1535 to 1601, is most deserving of notice because of his versions of Plutarch's Lives, 1579, from which Shakespeare took the characters and many of the incidents for three great Roman plays. Thus in Knott's we read, Shakespeare merely touches such a stage with the magic of his genius, and his serious speaks. Let me have men about me that are fat, sleep-headed men, and such as sleep o' nights. John Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much, such men are dangerous. A careful reading of Knott's Plutarch and then of the famous Roman plays shows to how great an extent Shakespeare was dependent upon his obscure contemporary. Knott's translation, to which we owe so many heroic models in our literature, was probably made not from Plutarch but from M. Boyard's excellent French translation. Nevertheless, he reproduces the spirit of the original, and notwithstanding our modern and more accurate translation, he remains the most inspiring interpreter of the great biography, interpreter of the biographer whom Emerson calls the historian of heroism. Summary of the age of Elizabeth. This period is generally regarded as the greatest in the history of our literature. Historically, we note in this age the tremendous impetus received from the Renaissance, from the Reformation, and from the exploration of the New World. It was marked by a strong national spirit, by patriotism, by religious tolerance, by social contest, by intellectual progress, and by unbounded enthusiasm. Such an age of thought, feeling, and vigorous action finds its best expression in the drama and the wonderful development of the drama, culminating in Shakespeare, is the most significant characteristic of the Elizabethan period. Though the age produced some excellent prose works, it is essentially an age of poetry, and the poetry is remarkable for its variety, its freshness, its youthfulness, and romantic feeling. Both the poetry and the drama were permeated by Italian influence, which was dominant in English literature from Chaucer to the Restoration. The literature of this age is often called the literature of the Renaissance, though, as we have seen, the Renaissance itself began much earlier and for a century and a half added very little to our literary possessions. In our study of this great age, we have noted the non dramatic poets, that is, poets who did not write for the stage. The center of the group is Edmund Spenser, whose Shepherd's Calendar 1579 marked the appearance of the first national poet since Chaucer's death in 1400. His most famous work in the Faerie Queene, associated with Spenser, are the minor poets Thomson, Sackville, Michael Drayton, George Chapman, and Philip Sidney. Chapman is noted for his completion of Marlowe's poem Hero and Leander, and for his translation of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Sidney, besides his poetry, wrote his prose romance Arcadia and the Defense of Poesy, one of our earliest critical essays, The Rise of the Drama in England, The Miracle Plays, Moralities and Interludes, our first play, Ralph Roister, the first true English comedy, Gamut, Burton's Needle, and the first tragedy, Gorboduc, the conflict between classic and native ideals in the English drama. Shakespeare's producers Lyly, Crete, Nash, Peele, Greene, Marlowe, the types of drama with which they experimented, the Marlowe skew, one man type or tragedy of passion, the popular chronicle plays, the domestic drama, the court of Lylian comedy, romantic comedy and tragedy, classic plays, and the melodrama. Marlowe is the latest of Shakespeare's producers. His four plays are Tamburlaine, Festus, the Jew of Malta, and Edward II. Shakespeare, his life, work, and influence. Shakespeare's successors, Ben Jonson, Dumont and Fletcher, Webster, Middleton, Heywood, Dekker, and the rapid decline of the drama. Ben Jonson is the greatest of this group. His chief comedies are Every Man in His Humor, The Silent Woman, and The Alchemist. His two extant tragedies are Sejanus and Catiline. The prose writers, of whom Bacon is the most notable, his chief philosophical work is the Instauratio Magna Incomplete, which includes the advancement of learning and the Novum Organum. But he is known to literary readers by his famous essays. Minor prose writers are Richard Hooker, John Foxe, the historians Camden and Knox, the editors Aclute and Perchance, who gave us the stirring records of exploration, and Thomas North, the translator of Plutarch's Lives, selections for reading, Spencer's Faerie Queene, selections in standard English classics, Spencer, Fairy Queen, selection in Standard English Classic BK1, in Riverside Literature Series, etc. Shepherd's Calendar in Castle's National Library. Selected poems in Canterbury Poets Series, minor poems in Temple Classics. Selection in mainly English poetry or words English poets. Minor poets Drayton, Sackville, Sidney, Chapman. Selection in mainly or word Elizabethan songs in scaling Elizabethan's lyrics. And in Palgrave's Golden Treasury, Chapman's Homer in Tamil classics. The early drama plays of Noah's flood in mainly specimens of the pre-Shakespearean drama, or in Pollard's English miracle plays, morality and interludes, or in Bella's Beatrice series section 2, L.T. Smith's The York Miracle Plays, Lily Endomian and the Hall's English readings. Marlowe Festus in Temple Dramatist or Mermaid series or Morley's Universal Library or Lamb the Specimen of English Dramatic Poets, selections in Manley's English Poetry or Ward's English Poets, Edward II in Temple Dramatist and in Hall's English Readings, Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice, Julius Caesar, Macbeth, etc. in Standard English Classics, edited with notes with special reference to colleague entrance requirements. Good editions of single page are numerous and cheap. Hudson and Dolphus and the Arden Shakespeare are suggested as satisfactory. The sonnets, edited by Beijing in Athenaeum Press series. Ben Jonson, The Alchemist in Canterbury Poets series or Marley's Universal Libraries. Selection in Manley's English Poetry or Bard English Poets or Canterbury Poets series. Selections from Johnson's Masque in Ivana's English Masque, Timber edited by Skilling in Athenaeum Press series. Bacon Essay School Edition, Gill and Company. Northup's edition in Riverside Literature Series, various other inexpensive editions in the Pitt Press Golden Treasury Series, etc. Advancement of Learning BK1, edited by Cook, Ginn and Company. Compare selection from Bacon, Hooker, Liley, Sidney, and in many and mainly English prose. Bibliography history textbook Montgomery, page number 208 to 238. Special works Creighton's The Age of Elizabeth, Hall's Society in the Elizabethan Age, Winter Shakespeare's England, Godby's The England of Shakespeare, Greece, Stratford-on-Avon, Harrison, Elizabethan England Literature, Sainsbury's History of Elizabethan Literature, Weber's Literature of the Age of Elizabeth, Ashley's Great Englishman of the 16th century, Skilling's Elizabethan Lyrics in Anthem Press series, Vernon Lee's Euphorian, Spencer, Text, Cambridge, Lord, Eldline, Eldine Editions, Neon Selected Poems of Spencer in Canterbury Poets, Minor Poems in Temple Classics, R. Burns Spencer Anthology, Church's Life of Spencer, in English Man of Letters series, Lawley's Essays in Among My Books, or in Literary Essay, Volume 4, Hamlet's Chaucer and Spencer, in Lectures on the English Poets, Volume 4, Hamlet's Dowden's Essay, in Transcript and Study, the drama, text, mainly specimen of the pre-Shakespearean drama, two volumes in Athenaeum Press series, Pollard's English Miracle Play, Moralities and Interludes, The Temple Dramatist, Morley's Universal Library, Albert's English reprint, Mermaids series, etc. Here's the best Elizabethan play. Gailey's plays of our forefathers, miracles, moralities, etc. Bats, the English religious drama, Skillings, the English chronicle play, Lowell's Old English dramatist, Boswell's Shakespeare and his predecessors, Simon Shakespeare's predecessor is the English drama, Skilling's Elizabethan drama, Lamb's specimen of English dramatic poets, Introduction to Hudson Shakespeare, his life, art, and character. What history of English dramatic literature. Decker's Guns, Hornbook in King's Classes. Marlowe, works edited by Bullen, Chief Plays in Temple Dramatists, Mermaid Stories of English Dramatists, Morley's Universal Library, etc., Lowell's Old English Dramatist, Simon's Introduction in Mermaid Series, Dowden's Essays in Transcripts and Study, Shakespeare, good text are numerous, furnishes Valiorum edition is at present most useful for advanced work. Hudson's revised edition each play in a single volume with notes and introduction will when complete be one of the very best for students use. Released Shakespeare in English Man of Letters series Lee's Life of Shakespeare, Hudson's Shakespeare, His Life, Art and Character, Halliwell Phillips' Outlines of the Life of Shakespeare, Lee's Chronicle History of the Life and Work of Shakespeare, Dowden Shakespeare, a critical study of his mind and art, Shakespeare Primer, same author, Baker's The Development of Shakespeare as a Dramatist, Lounsbury's Shakespeare as a Dramatic Artist, The Text of Shakespeare, same author, Randall's William Shakespeare, Bradley's Shakespearean Tragedy, Hazlitt's Shakespeare, and Milton. In lectures on the English poets, Emerson's essay, Shakespeare or the Poet, Lowell's essay in Among My Books, Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, Mrs. Jensen, Shakespeare's female characters, called also characteristic of women, Rolfe Shakespeare, the boy, Brandeis William Shakespeare, Malton Shakespeare as a dramatic artist, Marriage William Shakespeare, poet, dramatist, and man, the Shakespeare Apocrypha, edited by C.F.P. Book, Shakespeare's Holinshed, edited by Storm, Shakespeare Lexicon by Subcredit, Concordance by Bartlett, Grammar by Abbott or by French. By Johnson, Texted Mermaid Series, Temple Dramatist, Morris, Universal Library, etc. Masters and Entertainments of Ben Johnson, edited by Molly in Parish Group Library, Timber, edited by Skilling in Anthem Plus Series. Dumont, Fletcher, etc. Played Mermaid Series, Temple, Dramatist, etc. Skilling, Elizabethan Drama, Lowell, Old English Dramatist, Lamb's Specimen of English Dramatic Poet, Lee's Biographical Chronicle of the English Drama, Swinburne essays in prose and poetry and in essays and study. Bacon texts, essays in elements, library research, advancement of learning in Clarendon Press series, the Library of English Classics, etc. Church's Life of Bacon, English Man of Letters series, Nicholas Bacon's Life and Philosophy, Francis Bacon, translated from the German of Kate Fisher, excellent but great, Macaulay's Essay on Bacon, Minor Prose Writer, Sydney's Arcadia, edited by Sommer, Defense of Poesy, edited by Cook Athenaeum Press series, Harper's reprints, etc. Selections from Sydney, Prose and Poetry in the Elizabethan Library, Simon's Life of Sydney, in English Man of Letters, Bond's Life of Sydney, in Heroes of the Nation, Lamb's Essay on Sydney Sonnets, in Essays of Elia. Readings works published by the Oxford Press, selection by Grossart in Elizabethan Library. It is the last fight of the rebel in Harper's reprints Life of the League by Edward M. Wright Wallace. Richard Hooker's works, edited by Cabell, Oxford Press, Laws of Ecclesiastical Quality in Every Man's Library and in Morley's Universal Library, Life in Walton's Lives in Morley's Universal Library. Rodden's essay in Puritan and Anglican Larry's Lucas in Harper's reprints, and Limon, edited by Baker. Campus Fair in Mendes pre-Shakespearean drama. Northern Plutarch's Lives, edited by Wyndham in Tudor Library. School edition by Green and Company. Huxley's Voyage in Everyman's Library. John Introduction to Huxley's Diverse Voyage. Daily Voyages of Elizabethan Seaman. Willard's essay in short studies on great subjects. Suggested question. One is what historical condition help to account for the great literature of the Elizabethan age? What are the general characteristics of the Elizabethan literature? What type of literature prevailed and why? What work seems to you to express most perfectly the Elizabethan spirit? Tell briefly the story of Spencer's life. What is the story or argument of the fairy queen? What is meant by the Spencerian stranger? Read and comment upon Spencer's epic Helmion. Why does the Spence Shepherd calendar mark a literary epoch? What are the main qualities of Shakespeare's poetry? Can you quote or refer to any passages which illustrate this quality? Why is he called the poet's poet? For what is sacredly noted? What is the most significant thing about his foreborder? Name other minor poets and tell what they wrote. Give an outline of the origin and rise of the drama in England. What is meant by miracle and mystery play? What purposes did they serve among the common people? How did they help the drama? What is meant by cycles of miracle play? How did the moralities differ from the miracle? What was the chief purpose of the interviews? What type of drama did they develop? Read a typical play like Noah's Flood or Everyman and write a brief analysis of it. What were our first plays in the modern sense? What influence did the classics exert on the English drama? What is meant by the dramatic unity? In what important respect did the English differ from the classic drama? Name some of the Shakespeare's producers in the drama. What types of drama did they develop? Name some plays of each type. Are any of these plays still presented on the stage? What are Marlowe's sea plays? What is the central motive in each? Why are they called one-man plays? What is meant by Marlowe's mighty light? What is the story of Festus? Compare Festus and Rothe first, having in mind the story, the dramatic interest and the literary value of each play. Tell briefly the story of Shakespeare's life. What fact in his life most impressed you? How does Shakespeare sum up the work of all his predecessors? What are the four periods of his work and the chief plays of each? Where did he find his plots? What are his romantic plays? His chronicle or historical plays? What is the difference between a tragedy and a comedy? Name some of Shakespeare's best tragedies, comedies, and historical plays. Which play of Shakespeare seems to you to give the best picture of human life? Why is he called the million-minded Shakespeare? For what reasons is he considered the greatest of writers? Can you explain why Shakespeare's plays are still active, while other plays of his days are rarely seen? If you have seen by if you have seen any of Shakespeare's plays on the stage, how do they compare in interest with modern plays? What are Ben Jonson's chief plays? In what important respect did they differ from those of Shakespeare and the story of the alchemist or the silent woman? Name other contemporaries and successors of Shakespeare. Give some reasons for the preeminence of the Elizabethan drama. What causes led to its decline? And briefly, the story of Bacon's life. What is his chief literary work? His chief educational work? Why is he called a pioneer of modern science? Can you explain what is meant by the inductive method of learning? What subjects are considered in Bacon's essay? What is the central idea of the essay you like best? What are the literary qualities of these essays? Do they appeal to the intellect or the emotion? What is meant by the word essay? And how does Bacon illustrate the definition? Make a comparison between Bacon's essays and those of some more recent writers such as Addison, Lamb, Carlyle, Emerson, or Stevenson, having in mind the subject's style and interest of both essayists, who are the minor prose writers of the Elizabethan age. What did they write? Comment upon any work of theirs which you have read. What is the literary value of Norse Plutarch? What is the chief defect in Elizabethan prose as a whole? What is meant by euphemism as played by Elizabethan poetry superior to the prose? The Puritan age starts from 1620 to 1660. Its historical summary, the Puritan movement, starts from the Puritan movement. In its broadest sense, the Puritan movement may be regarded as a second and greater renaissance, rebirth of the moral nature of man, following the intellectual awakening of Europe in the 15th and 16th century. In Italy, whose influence had been uppermost in Elizabethan literature, the Renaissance had been essentially pagan and sensuous. It had hardly touched the moral nature of man, and it brought little relief from the despotism of rulers. One can hardly read the horrible records of the Medici or the Borgias or the political observations of Machiavelli without marveling at the moral and political degradation of a cultured nation. In the north, especially among the German and English poet peoples, the Renaissance was accompanied by moral awakening, and it is precisely that awakening in England, that greatest moral and political reform, which ever swept over a nation in the short space of half a century, which is meant by the British movement. We shall understand it better if we remember that it had two chief objects. The first was personal righteousness, the second was civil and religious liberty. In other words, it aimed to make men honest and to make them free. Such a movement should be cleared of all the misconceptions which have clung to it since the Restoration, when the very name of Britain was made ridiculous by the genius of the gay courtiers of Charles II. Though the spirit of the movement was profoundly religious, the Britons were not a religious sect. Neither was the Briton a narrow-minded and gloomy dogmatist, as he is still pictured even in the history. Pym and Hampton and Eliot and Milton were Prussians. And in the long struggle for human liberty, there are few names are honored by free men everywhere. Cromwell and Thomas Hooker were Puritans. Yet Cromwell stood like a rock for religious tolerance, and Thomas Hooker in a Connecticut gave to the world the first written constitution in which free men, before electing their officers, laid down the strict limits of the offices to which they were elected. That is a Puritan document and it marks one of the greatest achievements in the history of government from a religious point of view. From a religious viewpoint, Puritanism included all shades of belief. The name was first given to those who advocated certain changes in the form of worship of the Reformed English Church under Elizabeth. But as the ideal of liberty rose in men's minds and opposed to it were the king and his evil counselors and the band of intolerant churchmen of whom Lord is the great example. Then Buddhism became a great national movement. It included English churchmen as well as extreme separatists, Calvinists, Covenanters, Catholic noblemen, all bound together in resistance to nepotism in church and state, and with a passion for liberty and righteousness, such as the world has never since seen. Naturally, such a movement had its extremes and excesses, and it is from a few zealots and fanatics that most of our misconception about the Puritans arise. Life was stern in those days, too stern perhaps, and the intensity of the struggle against life was stern in those days, too stern perhaps, and the intensity of the struggle against nepotism made men narrow and hard. In the triumph of Puritanism under Cromwell, severe laws were passed, medicinal pleasures were forbidden, and an austere standard of living was forced upon an unwilling people, so the criticism is made that the wild outbreak of immorality which followed the installation of Charles was partly due to the unnatural restrictions of the Puritan era. The criticism is just, but we must not forget the whole spirit of the movement, that the Britain prohibited Nepal dancing and horse racing is of small consequence beside the fact that he fought for liberty and justice, that he overthrew despotism and made a man's life and property safe from the tyranny of ruler. A great river is not just by the form on its surface and certain austere laws and doctrines which make how ridiculed are brought on the surface of the mighty Britain current that has flowed steadily like a river of life through English and American history since the age of Elizabeth. Changing ideals. The political upheaval of the period is summed up in the terrible struggle between the king and parliament, which resulted in the death of Charles at the Globe and the establishment of the Commonwealth under Cromwell. For centuries, the English people had been wonderfully loyal to their sovereigns, but deeper than their loyalty to kings was the old section love for personal liberty at times, as in the days of Alfred and Elizabeth. The two ideals went hand in hand, but more often they were in open strife, and the final struggle for supremacy was inevitable. The crisis came when James I, who had received the right of royalty from an act of parliament, began by the assumption of divine right to ignore the parliament which had created him. Of the civil war which followed in the reign of Charles I and of the triumph of English freedom, it is unnecessary to write here. The blasphemy of a man's divine right to rule his fellow man was ended. Modern England began with the charge of Cromwell's brigade of Puritans at Naseby. Religiously, the aim was one of even greater ferment than that which marked the beginning of the Reformation. The great ideal, the ideal of a national church was falling to pieces like a ship in the breakers, and in the confusion of such an the action of the various sects was like that of frantic passengers, each striving to save its possessions from the wreck. The Catholic Church, as its name implies, has always held true to the ideal of a united church, a church which, like the great Roman government of the early centuries, can bring the splendor and authority of Rome to bear upon the humblest village church to the farthest ends of the earth. For a time, that mighty ideal dazzled the German and English reformer, but the possibility of a united Protestant church perished with Elizabeth. Then, instead of the worldwide church, which was the ideal of Catholicism, came the ideal of a purely national Protestantism. This was the ideal of lauded nationally by bishops, no less than of the scholarly Richard Hooker, of the rugged Scotch Covenanters, and of the Puritans of the Massachusetts Bay. It is intentionally interesting to note that Charles called Irish rebels and Scotch Highlanders to his aid by promising to restore their national religions, and that the English Puritans, turning to Scotland for help, entered into the Solomon Covenant of 1643, establishing a national Presbyterianism whose object was to bring the churches of God in the three kingdoms to uniformity in the religion and government, to preserve the rights of parliament and the liberties of the kingdom, that we and our prosperity may, as brethren, live in faith and love, and the Lord may delight to live in the midst of us. In this famous covenant, we see the national, the ecclesiastical, and personal dream of Lutheranism side by side in all their grandeur and simplicity. Years passed, years of bitter struggle and hard ache, before the impossibility of uniting the various Protestant sects was generally recognized. The ideal of a national church died hard, and to its death is due all the religious unrest of the period. Only as we remember the national ideal and the struggle which it caused, can we understand the amazing life and work of Bunyan, or appreciate the heroic spirit of the American colonists who left home for a wider nation in order to give the new ideal of a free church in a free state its practical demonstration, its literary statistics. In literature, also the Puritans was one of the confusion due to the breaking up of old ideals, notably standards of chivalry, the impossible loves and romances of which Spencer furnished the types, perished no less surely than the ideal of the national church, and in the absence of any fixed figure of literary criticism, there was nothing to prevent the exaggeration of the metaphysical voice. Toward the literary parallels to religious sects like the Anabaptists, poetry took new and startling forms. Dunn and Harvard and prose became as somber as Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. The spiritual gloom which sooner or later fastens upon all the writers of this age, and which is unjustly attributed to Puritan influences due to the breaking up of accepted standards in government and religion. No people from the Greeks to those of our own day have suffered the loss of old ideals without causing its writers to cry, Isha God, Aisha God, the glory had departed. That is the unconscious tendency of literary men in all times, who look backward for their golden age, and it need not concern the student of Literature who even in the breakup of cherished institution looks for some for gleams of a better light wishes to break upon the world. This so-called gloomy age produced some minor poems of exquisite workmanship and one great master of verse whose work would glorify an age of people. John Milton, in whom the indomitable Puritan spirit finds its noblest expression. I thank all my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students, scholars, teachers, trainers, special professionals, officers, officials, listeners, learners. I thank all honorable ministry managers. I thank all respected honorable advocates, organizers, and district supervisors. I thank the most honorable present missionaries. Thank you. Thanks, thanks, thanks.